This is the video introduction for the Prove It lesson plan. It was created and narrated by Sean Krupa and uses original material from Chris Steffen. This video and accompanying lesson plan are part of Ohio University's Boat of Knowledge in the Science Classroom, funded by the National Science Foundation. In this video introduction, we'll be covering how to conduct research with reliable sources. We'll start with a review of the scientific method, and then cover non-web sources, and finally we'll talk about web sources and how to evaluate them. By now, you should all be familiar with the scientific method, but let's go over the steps one more time. We begin by asking a question. Next, we state a hypothesis based on our question. We then conduct an experiment to test our hypothesis and analyze the results. Based on our results, we then make a conclusion about our hypothesis. So what's the common thread between all these steps? The answer is reliable sources. Every step in the scientific method requires reliable sources. Your first wave for a reliable source should be published sources. These include books and journal articles. These are considered the most reliable because they require editing and review before they're released to the public. In particular, with journal articles, peer review is the process where, in order to publish, your findings and methodology are reviewed by a panel of experts in the field in question. Here are some places to find books and journals. For books, you can obviously start with your local or school library. However, from a school computer, you can access OhioLink to get books that you might not normally be able to find. For articles, you can start with Google Scholar. However, again, from a school or campus computer, you can access InfOhio or EBSCOhost. Both of these will give you access to journal articles that you might not normally be able to get. Now let's talk about web sources. The number one rule when it comes to web sources is you only use a web source when you have no other alternative. Here are some types of web sources. They can be academic, encyclopedia, news articles, press releases, or blogs. These are arranged from top to bottom, from most trustworthy to least trustworthy. You can also use the website's domain as a good place to start when determining trustworthiness. However, this is not always the case, and we need a more formal test for web sources. This brings us to the CRAP test. As funny as the name might sound, the CRAP test is a formal way of evaluating web sources. CRAP stands for Currency, Reliability, Authority, and Purpose or Point of View. Currency is how new or recent a source is. The reliability is whether or not the source has a good reputation. Authority is whether or not the source has experience in the field that you're trying to question. And finally, the purpose or point of view is how objective or subjective a web source is. To understand the CRAP test further, let's do an example. Here's a website, www.blogspot.tsmithgardens.com. The story behind this website is Tim Smith is a retired biology teacher who writes a popular weekly blog about his hobby, gardening. Tim notices that this year his lilac bushes began showing buds at the beginning of March, which is the earliest he can remember. This inspires Tim to title his latest post, Global Warming and the Effects on Local Plant Life. Is Tim Smith's blog a reliable source? The answer depends on whether or not you're researching global warming, gardening, or retirement. The answer can be different depending on the question. Let's apply the CRAP test to Tim's website. In this case, you're researching the effects of global warming. Is Tim's site current? Yes, we said it's updated every week. Is it reliable? Definitely not. Tim might be an honest, nice guy, but this is the first thing he's ever written on global warming. What about authority? Again, this is doubtful. Tim is a science teacher and gardener, but that's a long way from being a climate expert. Finally, the purpose. This is a judgment call. Tim's making an observation about his lilac bushes more than anything else. There's no reason to suggest that this might be subjective. In this case, Tim's website fails 2 of the 4 parameters for the CRAP test. Therefore, it's not trustworthy when it comes to researching the effects of global warming. Now let's apply the CRAP test again. We'll use Tim's website again, but this time we're researching the hobbies of recently retired individuals. Is it current? Yes, we've already established that. Is it reliable? In this case, we can presume that it is reliable. Is Tim an authority on retirement and hobbies? We have no reason to believe that he isn't. We know he's retired, and he's serious enough about his hobby to write a weekly blog. Finally, the purpose of Tim's blog is to be observational and educational. Therefore, we can assume that Tim's being objective. So, in order to use the CRAP test, we also have to apply common sense. We just saw an example of a website that could simultaneously fail and pass the test depending on which questions we were asked. This leads us to erring on the side of caution. If you have a site that can pass and fail the test depending on your question, you should probably not use it. The best web sources will pass the test every time, regardless of what criteria you use it for. Here are some take-home points. We saw that all steps of the scientific method require reliable sources. We also saw that published sources should be your first choice. Use web sources as a last resort, and when you do, use caution. Using the CRAP test can be a formal test of whether or not a web source is reliable. If you have any questions of a web source's reliability, apply the CRAP test. This concludes the video introduction. Thanks for your attention.